In this series, we're going to analyze sites that have been built in Webflow and that are available under the Webflow templates if you want to check them out. So this template is called Catalyst, and we're going to have a look behind the scenes as to how this website is structured and how it was built. So overall, pretty standard agency website in the sense that we find a lot of commonality in terms of items. And what we're going to do now is we're going to access the designer view. So as you can see, the moment that we click on play in order to have access to the entire designer view, we are going to go first of all under the pages, and you can see how the pages structure is going to be fairly straightforward. Everything is cleaned and named in a way that is easy to access for us outsiders. And also, as you can see, under the services section, they added a folder, which is something that you can create from here. And you can add folders strategically in Webflow. Just keep in mind that you're going to have a specific URL slug, so you're going to need to think about the overview hierarchy of the website even before you start building the very first page in order to be sure that the sub nesting that you're going to creating with the folder is going to make logical sense for both the SEO crawlers such as Google and also as a whole on the website for UX standpoint for the visitors. Now, when we go under the navigator panel, you can see that it's very common practice to have this page head wrapper as the very top level div containing the entire page. Now, the reason why this is such a convenient practice is because I can easily copy this page wrapper, and it's going to copy each and every one of these elements below. So if I need to create another page and I want to add the page wrapper, it's going to be very easy, as well as of course having an element containing the whole section, because I want to remind you that in Webflow you cannot multiple select, so you can only select one item at a time. Now the global styles, these are going to simply be the styles which are applied globally. So you're going to need to reference the style guide for those. And then going to the very first component, which we're going to see on the top, we have the navbar, which of course is a component and the same is going to be for the footer. Now it's a great practice to have navbars and footers as components, since these are not going to change in any of the pages pretty much, unless in specific scenarios. So it's always good to have components for these two elements. And in between we have the main wrapper, which is simply a div, which is going to contain each and every one of the different sections for the website. So you can see how we have the main div and then individual sections, which as a reminder is this section right here, which as you can see, a section is a div block that extends across the full width of a browser window. So it's going to extend the entire width, and that is the reason why they have this section. And if we examine the first one, which is the home hero, if we click, we're going to see that we have this div, which is padding global. And if we check the properties, it's 2.5 rams per each side. So this is giving some padding on the left and the right side containing this element. And if we go one layer beneath, we can see that we have the container larger, which is essentially one more div, which extends 100% of the width, and there's simply going to be auto margin on the left and right side, but that is not really going to be a main element. And you can see that just beneath it we actually have the containing element, which is going to be single div block and the image here on the right. So this is really useful, and it's very common pattern to have this structure when it comes to the divs which are contained within a section. And as you can see in this case, they used a grid layout in order to contain these two elements. Now, I'm a big fan of grids when it comes to layouts in Webflow, and yes, you could have used Flexbox in this case, but one of the main advantages of having grids when it comes to the main structure is that they are so easy to adjust the responsiveness. So you're going to really have a breeze in a lot of instances whenever you're using grids in layouts. And I'm a really big fan overall. I tend to use grids all the time when I'm building a component from scratch, such as this one here. I don't necessarily use them just for elements such as tables or any tabular data really. So, which of course is the primary use which everybody thinks about when it comes to grids, but you can easily use them for these type of layouts. And if you go down to the very next section, you can see how in this case, again, we're using the same structure, padding global, container large, and then we have this element right here, which is simple block element. If we examine, then we have all of the different elements. Now, one useful thing to note is that they used a div in order to add spacing. So if I actually go ahead and remove it, you can see how we don't have that spacing between this tag and the title. Now, this is a practice which has been introduced especially early on, and some templates do still use it, and some developers and designers do prefer having a spacer div, which is something that you can consider doing yourself. I personally am not a big fan of the spacer divs, but they do have, their space within the Webflow ecosystem. So if you are one of those individuals who like doing that, there's nothing wrong with it. Just consider that there is going to be pros and cons in pretty much both approaches. So as you can see, we have also another space here, and one of the cons, it's in this case, we have a medium spacer, and then we needed another X small in order to fill in that extra gap. So you can start to see where this approach, starts to have its own pros and cons, and but regardless, that's simply an approach that they went for. And over here we have the main services wrap, which are all, of course, adjusted in this mega wrap. And this is going to be essentially just a flexbox. So if we check this here, flexbox direction in vertically. So this is actually a great use of Flexbox, a great example of how Flexbox can really help in these instances, and it makes total sense. And if we go over here and we examine the Flex child, since this was the parent, you can see how this is essentially going to be structured again with Flexbox internally, and yeah, it's quite efficient overall. I wouldn't definitely don't blame them for utilizing this approach. And then going to the next section, which is process, you can see how we have this container large, and again, they have just a heading, two spacers, which again, I'm not a big fan of necessarily having like multiple spacer divs over here, but I guess they needed it in order to fill in that gap. And then we have a grid, which is perfect for these type of scenarios where you simply want to have a simple grid, easy to adjust in responsiveness. So whenever I scale down, especially when I go to the mobile sections, grids make a lot of sense. And that's going to be pretty much also the same for the other sections, like the case studies In this case specifically, of course, they're using a grid, but since this is going to be part of case studies, and maybe we can even think about it as a blog post or blog content in the sense that we're going to have a database. So we are utilizing the CMS at this point. You can see how the CMS is connected, and this is something that I really want to show you. And let's go over here. So CMS, it's going to be for the most part structured within the grid, but we have the collection list wrapper, which is the parent, and then this is going to be the CS list, and then we go under the different items. So as a reminder, the CMS are going to be all available to set up in the settings panel, so you can connect to the source directly from here. Then going down, if we have a look at the testimonials, this is going to be an element that you already heard of and you already had experience with, and that element is going to be the slider. Now, one thing that I want to point out is how by default the sliders have arrows on the right and left hand side, but in this case we actually have the arrows right up here. So it's actually a perfect example showing how you can modify the sliders and adapt them to your specific needs. You don't necessarily need to stick with the original layout. So that's something that you always can do. And generally speaking, Webflow, the sky's the limit, especially if you start integrating some code. You really can do pretty much anything that you can think of. And now we're going to go down to this bottom section, which again is going to be pretty simple, pretty straightforward. The blog simply has the main padding global, container large, and then we have the heading and two spacers, since they really like this combination of medium and small, also to maintain a level of consistency within the site. And then we have the div block, which again contains a collection list, which is connected to a blog compared to the case studies. So have a look at this website yourself, and try always to think about how would you approach an element. So for example, one exercise which is extremely useful that you can do is have a look at the top section. Think about how you would structure this website, and then compare it to how the original designer or developer built it. And this is really going to be helpful in order to be active in your learning and really compare the approaches and learn from the pros out there.